accepted.
Okay. So yeah, good morning, everyone. Um, yeah, we'll just have to wait for a few seconds. Everyone's still looking for seats, settling down, and yeah. So before anything else, I'd like to thank Devoxx Krakow for inviting me to speak here in front of you, sharing what I know, and also I would like to thank the sponsors. Without them, this is not possible. And of course, everyone who's attending here and you're spending time with me, learning new things. Well, I appreciate that. Well, so I'm here to talk about GraphQL and Apollo Client for Java developers. And just a little bit about me. I'm Devlin Duldulao, originally from Philippines, Manila, but living now and working in Oslo, Norway for 4 years. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I've written some books. Recently, Spring Boot and Angular, I co-written that. Um, Co-written also a practical enterprise React, and my very first book is the ASP.NET Core and Vue.js. So yeah. Uh, so first question: is GraphQL part of backend or frontend? Anyone? Just whisper or yeah, it's either. It could be front end or back end. That's very good. So this talk will include slides and theories, explanations, and we're gonna do live demo. Oops. We're gonna do live demo using Spring Boot, latest Spring Boot 3.0, and React with Apollo Client. So this is really good presentation for anyone who haven't done any GraphQL. I'm gonna teach you the very basic and in the writing in the back end, and then eventually in the front end, what you need, what packages, what NPM libraries, how to deal with sending requests, and maybe some design patterns in the end, and about securities. So, what is GraphQL? GraphQL, I'd like you to think this is a specification only. So it's a query language for your API that provides a more efficient, powerful, and flexible client-server communication, alternative to RPC or REST, which is what we're using right now most of the time, REST. And what it means by a specification is that GraphQL is only a set of general guidelines on how to query data in a really efficient way. But you may use different approaches or design patterns when implementing GraphQL. What's good is that there are already GraphQL implementations in different languages. You can build a GraphQL server using Python, C#, Java, JavaScript, Elixir, Ruby, PHP, and more. Now, who's using GraphQL? This screenshot is very old. You can imagine this is like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. These are the companies who are using GraphQL in production. It's growing fast and probably multiplied by 5 or 10. So we have here KLM, Twitter, Leaf, Magento, NBC, Yelp, PayPal, Pinterest, Airbnb, Facebook, of course, or Meta. So these are the samples of companies who are using GraphQL technology in their production, just to name a few. So question is, why use GraphQL? So GraphQL has a lot going for it, but I will focus on the main advantages of moving your REST API maybe to GraphQL. So first of all, you get types which guarantees that the data you get will be the type expected and prevents many of the common errors with REST. That's one, and you get to see that later. It's really awesome tool, in the by default or out of the box IDE that it will provide later. And also, here is query multiple DBs from one GraphQL server. So also when you have multiple databases or even different databases serving the same application, GraphQL is much better approach to this disjointed architecture, as it serves single point to do all your queries versus multiple separate entities. And flexibility of the queries. So the other advantage of going GraphQL is this, flexibility of the queries. You can query for a very specific type of data, which is, again, I'm going to show you later. But not always ideal. However, GraphQL isn't the best solution in all cases. For instance, writing GraphQL types along with your entities, more code to set up. And if you're building a small application or API, REST could be a much better approach. Consider the cost of developing the GraphQL tool versus the value it may provide. So again, right tool for the right job. And if you're going to scale an application beyond the simple queries or already have a big implementation, then yes, GraphQL may make sense. So start small with REST, because implementing GraphQL isn't that big of a deal. And when you're ready, just go for it. And then before we differentiate GraphQL from REST, let's see what's common between these two or between them. So both are stateless. Both produce data in JSON format and available in any server-side languages and front-end frameworks. So now let's see what are the differences between the two. There's only a few. First, REST has multiple round trips to collect the information from multiple resources, whereas GraphQL has one single request to collect the information, right, by aggregation of the data. Next, multiple endpoints in REST. In GraphQL, it's only single endpoint. This makes GraphQL more maintainable and more user-friendly or developer-friendly, because we're the user. What else? In REST, you have caching. Caching is built into the HTTP spec. GraphQL, on the other hand, has no automatic caching systems. Because in GraphQL, you'll be sending posts all the time. When you're querying data, it's a post request. When you're updating data, it's a post request. When you're deleting a data, it's a post request. So post is not idempotent, right? So there's no caching level there. It's only in HTTP GET requests. So, however, there's no cache. In libraries like Apollo can do caching for you. Or you can also set up a proxy service between the client app and the GraphQL server if you want to do that caching. So yeah, those are the workarounds. So in REST, you get, post, put, delete, GraphQL query mutation. But I mentioned post request because when you check it in DevTool in your Chrome or Firefox, you would see that the request is actually it's a post request, but you'll be writing query and mutation. So yeah, those are the differences. Key concepts that I'd like you to know. These are, I'm not sure if this is too many for you guys, but this is very important. So let's go one by one. So query are used for reading, and mutation are used for writing or mutation. How it works. Subscription, so it's for creating WebSocket connections. Types, defines our GraphQL schema. Example, string, int, ID, or custom types. And resolvers, so resolvers are the functions that respond to queries and mutations. And this is where you put your business logic. And next would be context. So context, just like in HTTP, when you're writing your routers and controllers. You also have context here. So context is an object shared by all the resolvers of a specific execution, and it lets resolvers communicate with each other as well. So it's useful for keeping data such as authentication info, the current user, what else? Database connection, data sources, and other things you need to for running your business logic. And we have schema. So the schema defines the shape of your data. This is also the union of your query and your mutation. Because in writing GraphQL in the back end, this is your root. I would say it's like, this is where you combine your mutation and query, right? And you can see it later. Last one would be data loaders. So these data loaders, they batch, queries, and it makes sense to use this because there's a problem before GraphQL, before the data loaders, is the N1 plus problem where the query goes exponentially, like multiplies, and data loaders solves that by batching, the queries before it goes to the database. So those are the key concepts. Now, the structure of GraphQL query. So here's an example of GraphQL query that you can send from a client app to GraphQL server. And let's see one by one. We have here query here. So query is a read-only operation requested to a GraphQL server. This is an operation type. And other types are mutation, subscription, right? Again, mutation is for read-write operation, while subscription is for creating WebSocket connections. What else is here in this anatomy of GraphQL query? So we have object type, which is the most basic component of GraphQL schema. It's being used here as requested field, and that will be the object to be returned in the client. And here, scalar type, so can be primitive, such as when you say primitive, you have the string, int, boolean, float, ID, or not primitive type or custom type, which is your own object, right? What else? So one advantage of GraphQL is that you can be very specific about which kind of data you want to retrieve. You want to get to this data here, but only the ID and title. You can ignore some properties, right? And let's say properties that you want to ignore is completed or created at, which is sometimes not necessary to bring into the client application. Here for this query, we're not fetching them, only the ID and title. And sometimes you would see something like this with the name. This is another sample of GraphQL query, and there's the operation type and operation name. This is optional. Not sure if this is gonna work. Yeah, this is optional. So, but it will help you debug in server-side logging, and all this, and some here variable definition. So GraphQL queries allow you to be more specific regarding which data you want to fetch, and that can reduce the amount of data also, just like previously. So this is how we create parameters, and the bang operator is meaning it's a requirement, and I'm going to show it later during the demo. So here's a good, interesting part of GraphQL in introspection. So every GraphQL server has a special schema field at the query route, and using that, you can expose all of your objects in the fields in GraphQL server, and this allows developers to create amazing tools. For example, auto documentation. We can ask for a server what your fields and objects, and these fields and objects usually have names and descriptions, plus they can let you use every field. So you have free documentation. Unlike in REST, you would start writing for Swagger UI, you have the Swagger and configure it. Depending on which framework or language you're using, sometimes it can be like automated. Whenever you write controllers, it would automatically create a documentation. But in some programming language, that's not the case. You have to map it manually. So, but here in GraphQL, it's automatic. You have this free documentation. Code gen. So code gen, you can imagine if you have some front-end code, you might even able to guess what query do you need and generate because what's possible or not. So this is just a CLI tool, and if you run it, it will just send queries to your backend, fetch it, and then convert those response into interfaces automatically. So if you're using TypeScript, React, or Angular, it will automatically create files in TypeScript of those models or types or interfaces, right? Which is good because you don't have to write it manually. Static validation, so you don't even need to let a query go to the server and then get rejected because you know beforehand if that query is valid or not. So this is where it comes the squiggly. So in the IDE, you'll see later, you cannot just send requests if it's not valid requests because during while writing this query, you will know right away that if you're having this error in validation. And IDE integration, so that would help IDEs to validate your queries and autocomplete your queries because they know everything about the schema. So this is the best part that I honestly like in GraphQL is the introspection. And then how to get started, So build the GraphQL server, that's first, and then use GraphQL on the front end. So you can go to Spring Initializer and then just search for dependencies. GraphQL, you only need this, Spring Reactive Web, Spring Web, and then Spring for GraphQL. By the way, guys, it started, this Spring for GraphQL, it started from version 2.7. And now we're going to use 3.0 later. So before, there was like many ways of writing GraphQL, but I like this better because now it's been part of the Spring. And yeah, demo time. So let's do this. So end show. So I have to, mirror this. Hold on, give me a sec. Oops. I couldn't see it. Let's maybe make it move it here. It's too far, it's too far. Hold on. Drag it here. I think. Screen mirroring, screen mirroring. Hey. Oh, it's so small, and it's there. Oh, sorry. This was like on the other screen. Now we are back. Yes. So, hope you can see this. It's weird. But anyways, okay, so let's go with the Gradle first before the quick and dirty, just for you to see what dependencies I have here. Of course, the GraphQL starter GraphQL, also for tests, and GraphQL Java, GraphQL for the IDE that it's going to be part of this demo and application. And one thing you need to do also when developing is to enable this in your application properties is Spring GraphQL GraphQL enable to true. So you have this, IDE. Let's say IDE. This is it. I'm showing you. Yes, it's part of This, as you can see, localhost 8080 GraphQL. So this is where we're going to test our GraphQL, sending requests. So quick and dirty. So just for you to see how hard or how easy it is to write GraphQL. Types, query, resolvers. Here in resources, GraphQL. So this is very important when developing here. The dependency will look in this this directory, GraphQL. It has to be in that name. And then query GraphQLs, and this is where we're going to put all our queries. I already have 4 here. We're gonna do like 1 for like just to show you how quick it is. Hello world. And this query, let's say, it's going to return a string. So after this, after just declaring this, we can just copy this later for later use. Hello world, and then resolvers. I'm gonna create a Java class. Let's say hello query. You can name it whatever you want. For the sake of readability, we're gonna use it. Suffix it with query, and this hello query is just a controller. But here you would need a query mapping, and then for your method here, I'm going to change this to hello world since that's what we declare in the GraphQL QLS file. So then just run the application. Going back to that free IDE. Oops. See how, yeah, I think that's readable already. And you see that it appears right away. So this is what I'm talking about, introspection and free documentation that provided by GraphQL. Send hello GraphQL, which is what we wrote there. Here it is. Can you see it from the back, or it's too small? It's all good. Thank you. So yeah, that's how it is. Controller, query mapping, and since you're returning string here, which is what you declared. Where's it? Yes, here we declared it here. So let's go back to that IDE. So I told you that it can tell whether you're sending or writing a valid query. As you can see, you have this cannot query field he on type query. So the application doesn't know it, or this IDE. And what's good is you have this code completion. Just hit the control and space, no matter what you're using, Windows or Mac, just control space. It will just give you this code completion here. And if this is hello world, if it returns an object, you can just do this also, and then let the IDE help you when doing or writing your code through this code completion. But since it's not an object, it's a string, it also prevent you from writing this like this object literal, right? And it says syntax error expected, nothing here. So you have to go back to just deleting it. And if there's no squigglies, meaning it's a valid query, and you can just send it. What else? What if this is hello world, and as a front-end developer, I wrote my front-end, my client app in a specific way. This sucks, this hello world. What if I just wanted to change as to message? So in REST, you have to talk to your backend developer and then tell them, is it possible to change this property because I'm using this naming, the way I name things. Can you change it into a specific name so that I don't have to, change something in my code? You're lucky if, the backend developer is not busy. They can help you. But what's good about in GraphQL is you don't need their help. You can just, oh, I want to change it to something. I want to change the message, not hello world. Boom. So that's how you change it, and the response will gonna change. Not the same as hello world because it sucks. I wanted something meaningful message, and that's how you're gonna do it without bothering the back-end developers. You can just do it in the front end. So basically, you have more powers now, and in the front end. So that's good, right? Don't you agree? That's just very, very simple. But anyways, we can go back to some other samples here. So this is just hello world. So what about typing? So here is an example of custom type. So I have here client. So imagine this is my schema, and client has an ID, name, ID is, this is how you write it, email, phone, and client input. This is also necessary for the parameters. You have name, email, phone. So just like DTOs here, or entities, mutations, project. So this is another schema, or another, let's say, a DTO or entity. Have project here, ID like this. This is how we write it, name string, description, status client. Have an enum here, status. There's 3 here, pending, ongoing, completed. These are the values for my enum. And another one, input, because of passing data in parameters. Project input has name, description, status, client ID. So basically, I just removed the ID there. And after this, you have the mutation, right? So this is where you're going to write all the functions or methods for your mutation. So creating a new project, we have your input, project input, delete project. When deleting, I only need the ID, right? And by the way, in deleting something in GraphQL using mutation, you cannot return void here. There's no void. You have to return something. Best thing is just to return the ID that you're deleting, right? We have also another mutation here, new client, delete client, right? So that's for the mutation. For the query, you've seen this earlier. We have project, projects, and notice here, there's this square bracket. Hope you can see it. This means it's an array. It's in a collection. Okay, so now we have this definition, but in real world, you're not gonna write this before writing any resolvers. It goes, you're constantly switching between these files. And for example, here, project query. You have here projects, and I have here my repository querying from database, but in this case, it's just a fake database. And another one would be project. This time, this is the specific project. If this is the collection, find all, as you can see, and here, find by ID. So, nothing special. Client query. You have also some repositories here. One would be for the clients, find all. And one client here would require an ID, find by ID. That's one. Would be project mutation. So here, Mutation mapping is what we're going to use instead of query mapping. For the new project, as you can see here, an argument also is needed, and this is part of the GraphQL, and it's gonna look for the project input, and we define this right. And for the input, basically I'm creating a new project, setting its name, setting its description, status, and then just saving the project, and that would save it. Same as deleting here, project repository, delete by ID. That's it. And yeah, I think it's running now. So nothing really complicated here. As you can see, these are just GraphQL files, and this is how you would write it. Query resolvers, and that's it. Repository, just write, just the same as writing repository in REST API. Model also, nothing, nothing special. Enums also. So yeah, and now we have this. Maybe we can do a quick demo of GraphQL here. So fetch, let's do this. Fetch. So in GraphQL IDE, like this, you can have as many as you want here, ready, writing there. But by sending this, by clicking this, it will ask you which one are you trying to send. Let's try fetch projects. Empty array, I don't have anything yet. That's okay. In creating a client, let's say creating a client, and this client input, by the way, is coming from your variables here. So this is just like your Swagger UI, right? But in different way. In Swagger, you have this input, Select form when you start writing your inputs. But here, this is where you're gonna put your input in these variables here. Header, just ignore this first. We're here in variables. Client input, it's somewhere here. So I have here Tony Stark, Ironman Gmail, and ID also. I'm just going to this is for later, as you can see. But we're just gonna concentrate here, client input, which is this one. So that will trickle down here, and then passing it to input. And what is this? These are what you're trying to return or to get. And again, control space, have to. Phone here. Yeah, so this is what you're trying to return. So let's create that, create client. So we have a client here, and it returns an ID also, one. Let's also create a project. So we have here project input, and we're gonna use this ID. I already put it here, because creating a project requires a client here. So create project. And now we have this description, and I'm going to show this later in the front end, by the way. Yes, and Tony Stark has an ID, again, one. This new project here, it's called e-commerce website with an ID of one, and then removing, let's say, remove deleted project one, and let's delete also the client. And I have it here. That's why it's deleted. So, yeah. So that's how you're going to, debug your back end. And for the front end, you can move it here. So this is the front end. I'm using React here. What you need here is Apollo client. That's one. That's the NPM library you would need, and GraphQL for sending GraphQL queries. So what's the setup? Setup is really simple. In-memory cache, we have this here for caching. So why caching? This is very, very good. This is really, really helpful tool in your front-end caching, because you can do optimistic updates in your cache, and you don't need those loader anymore, because behind the scene, it will just, change the UI, change the data, your state, and this is really good in caching. That's one. And then here, creating a new Apollo client. So this is for the front end. Apollo client, GraphQL endpoint. We have here GraphQL endpoint, which is the Spring Boot, and then passing down here the cache. And then you'll be using Apollo provider in React. See here, coming from Apollo client, and then just drop the client there that you created. Very simple, as you can see. And then, what about the queries? How are you going to write? So normally, you would just copy and paste this. You would just copy it here, because this is what you're sending, right? You would copy this, go to your front end, and paste it here. But where? Client queries. Here's an example, as you can see. You're just copying and pasting it here. But you would need this GQL from Apollo client, and then writing here a backtick, right? But don't worry about this backtick, because you'll get also support from your IDE that you can write this with IntelliSense here. Query get clients, exporting it, and then for the project queries, start copying and pasting, moving the queries from here, from this GraphQL client, and moving all the queries and mutations to these project queries here, TS file. So pasting. So now we only have 3 here. It's gonna do that. Let's try that. So here, I think I should bring here the network tab, so you can see also. Oops. So add client. So here, as you can see, it's a post request, right? This is the request you've sent. Payload, operation name, and then response. Hope you can see this. Yep, you can see the response. Oops. So, new project. Let's say mobile app or shopping. Yep. Shop. E-commerce, cross-platform. Yep. Pending, select client. That would be me. Submit. And view. As you can see, another one here. It's all post, and here it is. So as you can see, it's working, and all posts, and you can see it here for debugging. And also there's a Chrome developer tool or extension that you can use here. It's GraphQL Apollo. So basically, it will just give you some of the tools here and bring it to your Chrome here, to your dev tool here for debugging. So I would highly recommend that. It's called Apollo Client Google Chrome extension. Bring it here. So yeah, basically that's the gist of the demo. Now we can go back to the slides. So what about security? Spring security, you can use that. And also you need to do some evaluation and implementation, like bulk endpoints to minimize the number of queries. Network level caching, that's one. Limiting the maximum query size. And again, the Spring security, that's going to be in the pair resolver level authentication. And it's going to be look like this. You have authorization before this business logic. And you can also use GraphQL. It's like a facade. So you have GraphQL in the middle, and then you have this REST or our RPC, SOAP base here, HTTP, and then or TCP directly to Mongo. So you can definitely do that through these resolvers. And also to mention the N1 plus problem, which is, don't have much time now. And that was already solved by data loader. References, GraphQLjava.com, here it is. GraphQL.org, learn schema, GraphQL.org/learn. And for the front end, ApolloGraphQL.com. Sorry if you're taking screenshots or pictures. Yes. And Apollo GraphQL for the front end. So again, this is the GraphQL for the front end. And Josh Long has really good series of this GraphQL tutorial. And yeah, you can definitely go for YouTube. It's like seven parts, 30-minute each, which is gonna teach you all the things in GraphQL also. And yeah, summary. Again, GraphQL is just a specification query language that ensures data is efficiently generated and accessed. You have your Apollo client, right? And yeah, Spring GraphQL does not care whether you're using Spring or Webpack or MVC. And the repo is here that I use. So 2 branches for 2 different GraphQL dependencies also. The old one and the new one that I showed you. So here's the GitHub repo. You can clone it. And it also includes the React part that I showed you with Apollo client. So thank you very much. If you have questions, just I will be outside, just walking around, eating something. Just approach me. And you can also message me on Twitter, Devlin Duldulao. You can also follow me. And can I have one last selfie? Because I appreciate everyone here. My first in Krakow, beautiful place. It was like amazing. So 1, 2, just raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, guys. Thank you.